Hi, I'm Carly of Gnarly Gaming, and today I want to geek out about a game that I'm absolutely enamored with. Today I'm going to be talking about Townsfolk Tussle from Panic Roll. So Townsfolk Tussle is actually launching today for a whole brand new crowdfunding campaign. The crew at Panic Rolls is not launching for the first time. This is actually their second time because they're launching for a reprint, which means it'll be accessible for those who want it again, as well as they will offer 2 new expansions to the base game. And so with that, it seemed as good a time as any to talk about the game, just what is special about it, whether it's worth backing, and whether it makes sense to get any of the expansions they are offering this go around. For the too long didn't read version of my own opinion, this has been my favorite battle-oriented game since Gloomhaven, and that says a lot. I play a lot of cooperative and battle-based games. However, this one isn't a campaign. It is a one-shot 4-battle adventure with loads of replayability that you'll get to see a climax in a single evening. This one also carries a very different theme. For a lot of our boss battling games, we like to think of dungeon crawlers and these dark and brooding worlds. This is a dark world, but it's a dark cartoonish world. In the game, players take on the roles of one of the townsfolk of Eureka Springs, from the conjoined Blopsy twins to a chicken named Henlo to a sad fisherman boy named Norman. Lots of charm and personality in these characters, but they're all sort of 1930s rubber hose cartoon style. So instead of like hinge-defined things, think flopsy arms and silly and Cupheadish-esque personalities. It's a wonderful theme and great for a boss battler. Each of these townfolk are set out to cooperatively defend their town from the ruffians invading. They used to have a sheriff, but oh no, the sheriff is dead. So over the course of 4 battles, they will fight 4 different real or perceived threats, from things like a creepy milk kettling frog to the derpiest doggo with blasters you've ever seen. And at the end of the game, if successful, they will all win together. If not successful, Eureka Springs will be lost forever. The ruffians will succeed, and the townsfolk will lose their lovely, charming, derpy little home. What you get then is 1 game for 2 to 5 players of 4 progressively harder battles against baddies. So just how does all of this play? Gameplay is divided into 2 phases, a town phase and a battle phase of sorts. The town phase is kind of your shop and upkeep phase. It starts with each player getting an event that happens to them, all incredibly narratively rich and silly and fun. Some of them are read out loud immediately to everybody, and others are kept secret. For instance, in our first game, Mike secretly had tried on one of James's headgear pieces, and so little did James know, but it was going to break on him the first time he tried to use it in the game because Mike's head was far too big. After every player resolves an event, the town phase will move on to the shopping part of upkeep. A peddler will peddle their wares, and players will have a chance to purchase them. Players can purchase as many as they can afford, and throughout the battles they'll have chances to earn money by completing feats. That means they'll have more and more money to spend on more and more gear to just deck themselves out as they go through each of the battles. The items themselves are full of personality and silliness, and a lot of them are player interactive or could have potential catastrophic consequences if you use them incorrectly. Some of them aren't as great. One of them was an old belt that we had that you could use to basically whip a ruffian, but if you basically rolled and missed, it would whip back at you. And we had someone actually whip themselves to death during our game because they whipped too many times and just kept hurting themselves. But after events and shopping, then we will actually go straight into the heart of the game, the battle phase. For each battle, a random ruffian will be selected. There's a whole bunch that come in the base game, but each of them have their own background of why they're here, their own special abilities and stats and action cards, and layout of where they show up in town and where you're going to ultimately ending up having to fight them. Also, because the game wants to get progressively more difficult and you're choosing a random ruffian each go around, each of them will have a series of special abilities, each getting harder, and depending on where they fall in your order within your battles, will determine just how tough this baddie is and in what kind of way. Battles will play through in initiative order, always starting with the ruffian and then all of the player turns. Ruffians on their turns will always draw a card from their action deck, and all of these are just dripping with personality. So no two baddies operate exactly the same way. When it reaches a player turn, they will utilize their movement points, which is just how far they can move on the map, as well as moxie, which is a fancy-smancy word for action points to do a variety of different actions. That can be something like utilizing an item to beat up a ruffian, or it could be using moxie to interact with some of the terrain pieces on the board. Play ends in one of two ways. Either the ruffian beats up on the players hard enough that they all succumb and die, in which case the game in full is over and Eureka Springs is lost forever, or players will defeat the ruffians, moving on to the next battle, and if they finish the fourth battle, players win. So far, fairly basic battle-y stuff here. And so what really sets this game apart? I think for one, which I've already talked about, is the theme. It is oozing in whimsy and charm in this dark cartoon world. All of the players have their own just special abilities. One, for instance, is like a fortune-telling mind reader. One is a chicken that can actually not die the first time he dies. They restore to 1 health, and they're actually a chicken running with their head cut off, a headless chicken. And every baddie has equally a fleshed out personality charm. The events are just... the narrative is just impeccable in this game, and it carries so much weight that everything you do just feels so... I keep saying bumblefucky charming because it's just like you're bopping through life and doing these things. It's the anvil falling on the head style of silly is how the whole dang game feels. And that kind of lighthearted but in a dark world feels really fun in this space. It's just fun. I don't feel too dark and serious. I feel very joyful and brought up within a very violent landscape. I just love it. I don't think I can name many boss battlers that give me genuine belly laughs. Things sometimes go well or go awry with boss battling. Sometimes you get unlucky and you whiff something, but this one, it's just, things are genuinely funny. Events are funny. Items are funny. The interactions we'll have in the game are funny. It's just so fantastically fun. And so I've said this a couple times now, but I guess this leads to my next point of why this game is so special, is the terrain and the interactions you can have on the board. So many boss battlers or dungeon crawls have obstacles to interact with or terrain that can hurt you or make things difficult, and this is no exception. You can end your turn by a beehive and get stung, and you might have to cross a river, which could take a bit. And all of those things exist in this game, but then even more so. There's a farmhouse on the edge of town where you can choose to like run over and knock and try to get a farmer to come out with his shotgun to help hit the ruffian. You can climb up on the trees to try to get better range. There's even an old dock shop where you might be able to revive a buddy who's already dead. But I think all of the interactions just still feel like that cartoony kind of haphazard and silly vibe to it that makes me love interacting with it. There's a bear trap that exists on the ground, and so I want to go set it and then try to lure the ruffian. It might be easier just to smack them, but like I really genuinely feel drawn to utilize the terrain in a big way, in a silly, fun way. That most boss battlers don't have. It just ends up being like you're going through a swamp and it's tough, or the lava hurts you and it's tough, and it's ways to make things difficult. I actually feel a sense of ownership of our town and world and wanting to like make the most advantage of it, even when sometimes it can be detrimental. Some of the boss's abilities will actually target people who are on terrain pieces or things like that, so it kind of can be a benefit or a curse depending on what's going on and who you're fighting. And the icing on the charm cake for me is the violence and glee and chaos of it not being fully cooperative. We are all battling together. We want to take down these ruffians. However, our sheriff died, and only one of us can replace them as the new sheriff in town. And that'll happen at the end of Battle 3. And the icing on the charm cake for me is the fact that this game is not fully cooperative. The game begins with our sheriff dying, and only one of us can become the new sheriff in town. thus introducing feats. These are battle goals that we'll have from the beginning of each of the rounds, and if achieved, give us points towards becoming the new sheriff. At the end of each round, whoever has achieved the most feats will get to loot from the ruffians. Each ruffian that exists in the game has 3 items, and you'll randomly get one of them that you'll loot from their body that boosts you up for the next round, which is really cool if you achieve a lot of feats in a round. But different feats are worth different points, and whoever's accumulated the most points, which might not be the person who's accumulated the most feats, will end up being the sheriff after the 3rd round. The game, however, is 4 rounds. And so while we're kind of competing, which causes chaos and people pursuing their own interests over the team interests in the first 3 games, in the last battle, it gets harder because everyone must band together and keep the sheriff alive, because if the new sheriff dies in the last battle, the whole team loses. What this amounts to is suboptimal plays. I may now want to go out of my way to make sure I die at the end of the game and not just the ruffian in order to achieve my feat. Thus, I'm going to only help so long as I can also make this car that I can interact with hit myself along with the ruffian, instead of just hitting them with my really powerful weapon that I have. It causes a lot of tomfoolery in the game. The terrain makes you want to interact with it anyway, and this just pushes you even further to kind of that suboptimal silly play. And it's cool. It's cool to get sheriff bragging rights if you become it, and it's also really cool that everyone has to kind of band together with you at the end. What keeps that kind of silliness going in the end game is, in addition to everyone having to protect the sheriff, every final baddie will have a special objective that if you achieve, you get a better ending for all characters in the game. And I don't want to understate how cool this is. The first time we played through, we were able to get the special objective, and the twist in the story that we got was so narratively wonderful that we immediately wanted to play again just from that alone, because we wanted to see what the other special objectives would unlock in this world for us. And so narratively, thematically, interactively, so exciting. And a lot of that is because of the fact that there's this small semi-cooperative element in a larger cooperative landscape. So that rounds out the gist of Townsfolk Tussle. I think it's fairly obvious that I love this game. I'm beaming with excitement to keep playing the base game. I'm incredibly enthused for the different ways that an expansion will add to this game. Not only will it give us alternate endings, which I'm always really jazzed for, but I think it'd be fairly easy to incorporate any kind of expansion just into play. Sometimes people will get expansions before they really need them, but I think it'll just mean more interesting items, more interesting terrain, more interesting baddies and characters to explore. And because of how narratively rich this game is, I already crave that. I'm a fairly anti-expansion person, but I want it now. I simply want it now. But this game might not be for everybody, and I think addressing the cons of the game or just who it might not be good for is a really helpful thing to do. I will say this game is long. The first time we played, though I had friends with analysis paralysis in tow, it took us 4 hours. The teach is really easy. That is not something to be scared of at all. You can pretty much do some quick rule introductions and teach along the way. However, the actual gameplay just takes a while. It's 4 boss battles, and that isn't super fast. I wouldn't want it to be, but it's a long game. It's not one that I think I could even realistically get to the table on an average weekday night, where gameplay is maybe an hour and a half tops. This is a really good weekend game, where you have a Saturday or Sunday to sit and really enjoy this 3 to 4 hour experience together. Maybe your group is a little faster, but 3 hours, I would say, is a fairly reasonable window to dedicate to these battles. Some people have proposed that maybe the game could be shortened to 3 battles as a house rule. I do know that Panic Roll is coming up with some game variants to, I think, address some of those length concerns. However, for me, I think this game really shines at the length that it is. I really wouldn't want it to be shorter. If it was only 2 battles before the sheriff was announced, if you have one that kind of flops for you, you don't really feel like you have a fighting chance. So 3 battles kind of gave everyone a little bit of momentum and hope. You have enough time to visit the peddler and get enough shop upgrades that I feel like I actually get a sense of character building that isn't just, oh, I got to buy an item once, and then this round I didn't have money, and now it's over. And the last battle feels really cumulative. You build up to it in a really exciting way. Perhaps there's a ways to scale it down at 3 battles, but I think the 4 battles does a lot to make this feel kind of like a little baby campaign in one sitting. It's long, it's a lot, but it's good. And it's not overly thinky, which could be a bad thing or a good thing depending on the person. And perhaps this is the next criticism, is often the decision space is very, very small. There might be 1 or 2 moves that make sense for me on a given turn. And some turns you might not even be able to do much depending on how far out of the way of the action you are and things like that. So there's some obvious things to pursue, some silly things to pursue, but there's not really a ton of like world building or character building or anything where you have to really, really overly tax yourself. I think that suits the length well, but the length and decision space could be something that is a reason that this isn't a good game for you. If you're looking for something a little meatier or a little shorter, perhaps this isn't the game for you and your crew. So while I can recognize that this game might not be for everyone, I, for one, am so charmed by all of it. It has been a joy to get to the table. We've been itching ever since we played it to get it back and see what the next 4 hours will give us. And I am clamoring for the additions that are on the way in the Kickstarter. And so with that, that is all from me today. I'll put a link to the campaign below so you can check it out if that's something that interests you. And if you have any questions about the gameplay or my experience, I'm happy to answer those in the comments. And otherwise, I will see you all for the next video.